Okay, we're talking with our colleague Adrian Salbuchio in Argentina. Is the Argentine media taking notice of the Occupy movement up here to any significant degree? We had our first major casualty last night when the Oakland police fired a rubber bullet at point-blank range into the forehead of a United States Marine who did 2 tours of duty in Iraq. He is in critical condition now, having had brain surgery. I don't know if this is being played in your media or not. I'm curious.
It is coming out in the papers. Yes, I did read about that dreadful event yesterday, I think it was. It has, shall we say, moderate media coverage, but in a way, the case of Argentina is rather weird or rather strange because we went through as you well know, we've discussed this on your program, we went through a very similar, very violent stage only 10 years ago. But since then, things have picked up, have improved, definitely. There can be no doubt about that. At least they have stabilized. And since the 2008 financial meltdown did not impact neither the region nor Argentina very hard because of the fact that we had already undergone that before that, and we were not as dependent on global loans and so forth. So all in all, although people see it, again, it's all human, all to human. We tend to see it as something that we've already gone through, and well, now it's the turn of the Europeans and the Americans and so forth. But yes, it does hit the media. But I get that the feeling I get is that it doesn't impact on people because they figure, okay, it's something that happened to us, but it's not impacting on me directly. It's one of the things we have to deal with, and that's people are basically egotistic. Now, that's nothing new, but I think it has a lot to do with education because we've been, and that's probably the main advantage that the enemy has over us. They have been educated and trained to think and act very long term, and we have, the rest of us, 99.9% of the rest of us, have been trained and educated to act in the very short term. And short-term thinking makes you very egotistic because from the very beginning you're told, get an education, get a family, have kids, get your house, prepare for your retirement, and then the rest of your life will just be playing golf and having a good time. It all starts and ends with little old you. Whilst we know if you are a religious person, a believing person, that life is much more than that. And the enemy that we are up against, since they are long-term planners and thinkers, not that they're generous, but they are already used to the fact of thinking beyond their own lifespan, beyond their own generation. So that, in a way, I can't call it generous, but it does give them a much more strategic mindset. So
it gives them a great advantage, too, multi-generational planning, absolutely. And they are now literally in full view of anybody who cares to notice, in full charge of their third, I call it almost the MTV generation. It's the telegeneration here. It's good times, it's escapism, it's pushing a remote control and having 200 channels now to escape reality. Not to mention the fact that no one is responsible anymore for anything. It's always someone else's fault. So we have this amazing social transformation that has been engineered. It's not accidental, and it is being spread, of course, worldwide by television. And Hollywood is probably the eye at the top of that whole entertainment pyramid.
Well, one of the things that I say time and again every time I'm given a chance to speak on radio or TV down here is, hey, everybody, look at what's happening in North Africa, look at what's happening in the Middle East. It's no coincidence. It's being engineered. They are taking advantage of all these things. The very fact that it is simultaneous from Tunisia all the way to Syria and even into Iran is proof enough that there is a hand behind this. But watch out, from the Argentine point of view. Now we see it as something very far away over there in the Middle East and North Africa, but it is coming this way. We will be seeing a Latin America spring, or they will give it some such marketing name. And when it comes, it will probably start in Venezuela, but it's going to work its way down because these people need to deconstruct all sovereign nation states, and that entails violence. And yet people will just sort of say, okay, who knows, we'll wait and see.
No, you're right. Venezuela is clearly a target. I'm not sure if this country will wait until after it engages Syria and then potentially Iran before it turns its sights to the south. But Venezuela is sitting on, according to one viable report, up to 5 trillion barrels of recoverable petroleum resources. 5 trillion. Now, Saudi Arabia has 600 billion, to give you an idea. So let's say it's even 4 trillion. The idea, of course, is clear. Venezuela has too much energy untapped to be left to its own devices. Libya doesn't even show up on the radar. Libya's big problem, of course, was that Gaddafi had begun to really press for the issue of the dinar, a gold-backed currency that would have been applicable to all of northern Africa. That was a no-no. That didn't go over well with the Rothschilds and the European Central Bank. By the way, Mrs. Merkel said that if the euro fails, there could be civil war in Europe. A very interesting statement from her. I'm not quite sure I agree with her, but she's living over there and I'm not. It does concern me greatly that Europe rolled over and laid down so easily. All of these countries, Adrian, with 500, 1,000 years of cultural, scientific, literary history, political history, all of that was washed away as they became, within a year, members of the EU. It was bizarre. I've never seen anything like it.
It was an absolute tragedy to see such great nations as France and Italy and Germany and Spain going into the fold. In a way, I'm not saying that this is an excuse, but I can understand the fact that they went through two such terribly horrendous wars in 1914 to 1918 and then 39 to 45, that in a way they are, I don't know, they have an instinct against war and they just don't want to have any more wars. I can relate to that. I can understand to that. But I don't think that justifies being so cowardly.
It was truly amazing to see. And when you, as you pointed out earlier, Zionism, of course, before it was even named Zionism, was the force on the planet. It was the money force, and they created Bolshevism. They created, and every major ism of the last century essentially was created by Zionist money and Zionist philosophy. As we look back on the last century, the century of Zionism, really, now we're able to talk about it. Back then we weren't. You didn't dare say anything that had anything to do with Jewish Americans or Jewish Israelis or Jewish anything. Now we understand that Zionism is a secular, non-religious, essentially Jewish construct that has as its goal the absolute subjugation of the planet. And it is way ahead of the game in terms of achieving that. It had certainly mapped this out centuries ago. It understood through the Rothschilds, which essentially is world Zionism, the Rothschilds, that controlling a nation's money basically gave you the keys to the kingdom. And the famous Meyer Amschel Rothschild said, no, just paraphrase it, you know the quote, I don't care who the politicians are, just give me the right to control the money. And you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. They know. And so what was the first declaration of the National Transitional Council in Benghazi when they established, allegedly, a free Libya? They said, the Libyan Central Bank is now established. They should just call these central banks what they really are, the Rothschild banks. It's very simple.
It is indeed, and when you start looking at patterns throughout history, because history is the great teacher, and not remember your own history and even other people's histories, like an individual suffering amnesia. You don't know where you came from, you don't know who you are, and anybody can lie to you. And a poor guy who suffered amnesia, any cheeky guy might come around and say, oh, I'm your brother, I'm your friend, I'm your dad, and God knows what can happen with that because you've lost your memory. Well, the same goes for entire nations. If you forget your own history or if it's been distorted, it's like suffering amnesia, and anybody can come along and really confuse you.